Welcome to Resilient Leadership, a webinar for AmeriCorps Vista leaders. In times like these, when a pandemic has disrupted daily life and calls for justice ring out across communities, leaders are being called on to be adaptable and resilient. I'm your host, Andy King, a Senior Training Specialist with AmeriCorps Vista, and our presenter for this session is Janice Glenn. Janice has spent most of her career focused on national and community service as a leadership coach, a trainer, and facilitator. Back when AmeriCorps launched, Janice served as the first executive director of the Delaware Commission on National and Community Service. She's also served as an adjunct faculty for the National Service Leadership Institute, and in a number of different roles, Janice has trained and coached state commissions, Vista members, and Vista leaders. So welcome, Janice.
Thank you so much, Andy, and welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you to talk about resilient leadership. And as Andy mentioned, we are in challenging and unprecedented times that demand resilience in ourselves and in our teams. Now more than ever, leaders need to develop this capability. So welcome to Resilient Leadership. So we're going to look at some outcomes that we've identified for this webinar today. We want to be able to define resilience and to understand why it matters, why it's critical to being a Vista leader. We want to share 4 strategies that for building resilience and science-based practices for you as Vista leaders, and that you also can impart to your Vista teams. Throughout the session, we'll give you opportunities to share your ideas, and there will be time for questions at the end. I'll also share some resources, as we mentioned, as Andy mentioned, for further study in this topic of resilient leadership. Although the topic of resilience is important in both our personal and professional lives, for this webinar, we'll focus on resilience in the workplace. So in these tumultuous times, the topic of resilience emerges so often. And this quote sets a stage for our conversation, because it isn't about how you avoid difficulty, setbacks, stress. The question is, how are you going to face it? So what is resilience? To get started, we want to define what that is and why it matters and how resilience relates to change, which is constant and ongoing, and how it relates to emotional intelligence. So let's start with the definition. Resilience is the capacity to bounce back from setbacks or failure and to learn from those experiences. Resilient leaders not only endure challenges, but they get stronger in the midst of them. They thrive, not just survive. Resilience is also the capacity to maintain competent functioning, which means staying calm, gaining clarity, stability in the face of major life stressors. It is important to note that resilience is a combination of personal history, environment, situational context, and a very small amount is genetic. Therefore, that means that resilience is a learned capability. It's a choice. It's a deliberately cultivated skill. Andy, back to you.
All right, so now that we've defined resilience, I want to invite you into the conversation. So thinking about what resilience is, please share your ideas in the chat on this question. Why do you think resilience matters for leaders? Again, please make sure you select all panelists and attendees before you post your chat, so that way everyone can see your response. So again, why do you think resilience matters for leaders? All right, so thank you, Megan. Megan shared that it's important to be a stabilizing force for your team in a time of uncertainty and when there's lack of clarity. Yep, absolutely. Let's see, what else? From John, as a leader, it's important to provide an example to the people on your team. Sydney said, anxiety is contagious, absolutely. But when we remain resilient and we model resiliency, our vistas are better able to stay calm and centered. Olympia, resilient leaders stay to guide a team to follow through. Duana, resilience matters to better support our team and to withstand change, I guess, and stress. Resilient leader helps set a foundation for a resilient team. All right, these are great. If someone is uncertain or easily shaken, it might be hard to go to them knowing that they might not be able to handle it. So that's a great point from Amanda. Jamila shares to continuously uphold your team through any circumstance. Yep, maintaining trust within the team from Gretchen, absolutely. Showing your team that it's okay when things don't go as planned and you can find a solution. Angela says it's a safe place in a storm. Oh yeah, and Jamila clarified to uphold your team through any circumstance. Great. All right, these are terrific responses. Thank you all so much for these ideas. Janice, do you have anything to add about why resilience matters for leaders?
Well, yes, they are excellent reasons of why it matters, and I really love all the things that you said. Another, just something to think about too, and why it matters, it's because in the face of this chronic stress, constantly increasing demands, complexity, and change, resilience helps us with that, those disruptive forces, and it helps us adapt with integrity. And it also helps us keep motivated and determined. So that, I hope that adds to some of the thoughtful comments of our VISTA leaders. So thank you for those. Wonderful. Okay. So let's recap of why resilience matters, especially for you as VISTA leaders. So leaders need resilience and agility to thrive amidst disruptive, fast-paced change. Adapting to change will improve your effectiveness and productivity, and it builds perseverance and allows us to learn from setbacks rather than being defeated by them, to see setbacks, to see them as a stepping stone to learning and growing. On the flip side, if without resilience, a leader struggles with changing or ambiguous situations, and it can drain the morale, productivity, and energy from the team. So if you're familiar with the concept of emotional intelligence, you've probably already noticed that there's a strong link between resilience and emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence is the ability to understand, to use, and manage your own emotions in positive ways, to relieve stress, communicate effectively, empathize with others, overcome challenges, and diffuse conflict. Emotional intelligence competencies are learnable capabilities, just like resilience is. Dr. Daniel Goleman, who popularized emotional intelligence, explained that a person who is self-aware, socially adept, and empathetic will be able to survive and thrive on the other side of crises because they have the social and relational skills to be able to advocate for themselves, to handle unexpected and unfortunate circumstances, and to provide empathy and support to others. So now that we have a good sense of what resilience is, why it matters, and how it relates to change and emotional intelligence, let's look at ways that we can develop our resilience. So before we look at how to build it, let's look at characteristics of resilient individuals. So first, they have a positive, realistic outlook. They don't dwell in a negative space. They focus on what they can change, and resilient people reframe a difficult situation and look for meaningful opportunities within it. Highly resilient people have a solid sense of what they consider right and wrong, and it guides their decisions. They have a moral compass, and they know their values. And they have a belief in something greater than themselves, a sense of mission or a greater purpose. This could be a spiritual practice. It could be a participant in a robust community. It can be a powerful purpose that guides them. This belief gives leaders courage and strength. Resilient individuals are concerned for others and behave altruistically. And finally, they have a support system, and they support others. Very few resilient people go it alone. Being compassionate can result in feeling needed, and believing that we can help others makes us stronger and more resilient. And a very quick example of that, when countries were shut down, Italy, for example, was totally shut down, sheltered in place, you saw people coming to their balcony and singing for their neighbors, for their community. That was resilience in action. So as we stated, we are going to share with you 4 strategies that build resilience. Resilience, as we said, is a skill that can be learned and strengthened, deliberately cultivated with intention and practice. So you can become a more resilient leader, each and every one of you. Everyone's born with some amount of resilience, and everyone can improve their resilience. So let's look at the 4 strategies. Okay. So number 1, reflection and self-assessment. Second, strive to continuously learn and grow. Third, become more purpose-driven. And finally, cultivate relationships. So we're going to take them one at a time. So strategy number 1, reflect and assess. This is where you examine your feelings and internal conflicts, beliefs, your strengths, your weaknesses, your perceptions of the world. This self-awareness is an integral component in building resilient leadership. We shift our ways of being, the way we see and engage in the world around us, assess our response to challenges, and then open ourselves to possibilities and solutions. Next, we work to understand how our emotions impact our performance and how our feelings contribute to our actions. And thirdly, resilient leaders are open to feedback. They take it in and they process it. Learning about ourselves through interactions and feedback from others is a gift that helps us learn and ultimately become more resilient. So now let's look at some specific science-based practices around reflection and self-assessment. So first, assess your strengths and weaknesses and reflect on what motivates you. Ask yourself some questions. What matters most? What am I willing to put my time and energy into? What am I passionate about? What am I good at? And where could I improve? Journaling is a powerful practice for reflection and self-awareness. And journaling can be just one word a day. I know sometimes people think of journaling as like, I don't have time, but it can be just one word a day. It can be a phrase a day that sort of documents that important day. So it doesn't have to be long. A word, a paragraph, a page, whatever works for you. And remember, it takes 21 days of an activity or a practice to become a habit. So also you invite feedback from others, and you invite feedback from others that have very different perspectives on your effectiveness. This helps you reduce behaviors that don't work for you and maximize those that do. Once feedback is given, demonstrate a real effort to improve. Thirdly, self-care. In the midst of great turbulence, which is where we are now in the world, take care of yourself. A leader's most important work is being a good steward of herself or himself, physically, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. As Brené Brown says, treat yourself like someone you love. Role model this self-care practice to your VISTA team. A couple examples of self-care practices that you can implement at your organizations. Studies show that recovery breaks, every 90 to 120 minutes. So in other words, you can set a timer or set an alarm on your phone, whatever it is. After every, say, 120 minutes, you take a 5-minute recovery break. And that moves you from being in the continual performance mode, getting things done, keep going, into recovery mode. You have to identify what recovery is for you. What refuels your energy? Is it a mindful walk? Is it meditation? Is it deep breathing? Stretching? Is it a real lunch break? Studies show that taking the recovery break improves your focus and your productivity. So another self-care practice is practicing gratitude. So the gratitude practice is, saying maybe 3 things at the end of the day that you're grateful for. It can be a text to a friend or a colleague, someone that you're close to, a partner, whoever. Here's my day. Here's some things I'm grateful for. And it could be simple, like the sun came up and I enjoyed flowers, whatever it is. Research shows that a gratitude practice increases resilience and shifts perspective to a positive mindset. And I do want to go back because I missed one self-care practice that is very important, and that is mindfulness. And this, again, is something you can implement at your organization immediately. Take 1 or 2 minutes to do a mindful pause before a meeting, to get in the present moment. Organizations such as Google, Apple, Eileen Fisher, huge Genentech, they all incorporate a mindful pause into their day. And that's something you could do immediately. And then finally, exercise compassion for yourself and others. Give yourself permission to be less than perfect. It keeps you able to learn from your mistakes, and exercising compassion with others makes it easier to do for yourself. So let's shift now to the second strategy, learn and grow. So this is something that we have to do continuously. Change is everywhere, constant, like waves making their way to the shore. Plans get undone with regularity. Your expectations do not always get met. The question, how do we respond? How do we face it? Resilient leaders see adversity as a learning experience. They see challenges as opportunities or gifts that help them learn more about themselves and bolster their resolve to overcome hardship. Next, resilient leaders there's a significant part of continuous learning is about the mindset. Resilient leaders have a positive mindset, and it's how they approach crisis, adversity, and change. Resilient leaders explore solutions, innovate, improvise. Reframing to a positive mindset requires examining a situation from a different perspective. And finally, resilient leaders use adversity as a superpower. Each time we navigate through a crisis and find a little strength in it, we gain insight. We can learn from and practice getting braver. So now let's look at specific practices for ongoing learning and development. The first practice is to manage your resistance to change and refocus emotions and thoughts, both on our own and others, in order to find a way through challenge. Another practice around learning and growing is to relinquish attachment to particular outcome. Focus instead on adapting to change and finding a solution that will work. Thirdly, another practice, foster a workplace culture where failure is seen as a learning opportunity. You can design a safe space with your team where your Vista members can take risks, make mistakes, learn from each other, apply learnings to move forward. This includes inviting all voices to be heard and honored. In a learning culture, you listen to the team's input, ideas, recommendations, and build a culture where everyone asks what worked well, what needs improvement, what can we learn from this situation. And finally, infuse appreciation, gratitude, and humor and fun in your interactions. Spark positive emotions in your vistas. Celebrate successes, even small ones, to reinforce their innovation, to try new things. Andy, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Janice. So now we'd like to hear again from you and hear some ideas about practices either that you've used for self-reflection or things that you've read about that you think would be useful, or in the area of learning and growing within your team of Vistas. So again, we'll use the chat as a reminder. Please select all panelists and attendees so everyone will see it. And the question, how can you encourage self-reflection or learning and growing within your team of Vistas? And we'll give you a minute or so to put your thoughts together. All right, so Tiffany shared to integrate this into team meetings, right? So you could do self-reflection activities or opportunities for learning and growing right within the context of a team meeting. Great suggestion. Let's see, John said, you can encourage this by giving examples of how self-reflection, self-growth has benefited you. Yeah, absolutely. So talking about the benefits and helping them to see what they could potentially gain from it is a great way to motivate them. Rhiannon says practicing expressive writing activities, right? So you could do that at any time, really. Let's see, providing professional development session and then creating different activities within that session. So right, so you could do the self-reflection and the rest within a professional development. Thank you, Dacia. Cheryl says, we've implemented one-on-one weekly meetings with each Vista member. It's been very successful in terms of self-awareness, encouragement, and growth in the individual person. That is phenomenal. If you can do that, if you've got that set up, that's a tremendous resource for your members. Duana says, during team meetings, we allow members to reflect their feelings And saying okay is not a feeling, so that's a good reminder. Their feelings, challenges, and then talk about who can help. We encourage and share support based on the member's challenge. That's a great idea. Joelle shares through providing a safe space for them to share. Absolutely. So allowing them the space and the freedom to talk about things even when they're not going well, and to talk about mistakes or missteps and to get input in a safe way. Terrific. From Sydney, we can share a challenge of the week or a challenge of the month where we talk about what went wrong, the outcome we wanted and had to release, and how we came out stronger on the other side. Wow, I love that. Challenge of the week or challenge of the month. I'm going to write that one down. Let's see, Heather shared, you can foster a welcoming environment through social activities and sharing personal experiences with your team. Tyler tries to engage each VISTA member about a particular project or task that has been challenging or exciting for them. Often by email or video chat every other week. I always try to relate this to goals they have shared with me or other things they find important. So great, focusing in on that motivation piece that Janice had talked about. These are great ideas. Olympia says she assigns activities like surveys with motivational or informative media and host a virtual office hour to discuss challenges. And from Marina, establish community agreements and a team identity. Allow space for mutual invitations to share and emphasize the importance of mental health resources. So there's 3 additional suggestions all right there. These have all been great. Yeah, I think, Janice, I'm going to turn it back over to you to see if you have any thoughts about all of these suggestions.
Okay, well, that's an impressive list. Thank you so much. That's impressive. One thing I could just add very quickly is that, and some of you said it about, mistakes and when, what happens with your VISTA members. But mistakes and failures and setbacks, help them see it as an experience to learn from, not about their identity. It's an experience. So it's not who they are. That failure, to not internalize it is what I'm trying to say. So that might be something to think about too as you do this. But very impressive. Thank you. So let's look now at the third strategy, be purpose-driven. Resilient leaders keep connected to the mission of the program, the long-term goals, the vision, the direction. When things get hard, this is number 2, when things get hard, it's important to remember why you are doing what you are doing. A purpose provides a valuable sense of orientation and meaning, especially in times of adversity. So look for ways that crisis and adversity connects to your values and revisit those in time of struggle. Psychologists have found that people with a strong sense of purpose experience more resilience, a stronger sense of well-being, and even better cognitive functioning. Purpose fosters resilience in part by protecting the brain against the negative effects of stress. So a quick example of that, too, is as we think about purpose. You've seen through this pandemic doctors, nurses, EMTs, personnel in hospitals. You often hear stories of when they do have time off that they feel compelled and want to go back. And they can't wait to go back because they are so connected to their purpose of healing and helping, and that's pushing through that adversity. Okay, so purpose-driven practices. Let's look at these. So one way to look at a practice around purpose is think back of what inspired you to be a VISTA. What inspired you to join? Why? Why did you join VISTA? That can help when things get tough. Next, circle back to purpose often. One way to do this is define your purpose. You could do this exercise with your VISTA teams. Define your purpose statement in 6 words. For example, I put one of mine that I've worked with for me is passionate advocate for advancing social justice. So in 6 words, define your purpose. Another practice, design a purpose board, a visual image of your purpose, your why. Understanding and sustaining a vision of why we do things strengthens resilience and adaptability. Next, a good practice is to move toward goals. Develop realistic goals to do something regularly, even if it's a small achievement. It enables you to move forward with the things you want to accomplish. What's one thing I know I can accomplish today? That question helps you move in the direction you want to go. And finally, look for opportunities for self-discovery. People often find that they have grown in some respect as a result of a struggle or challenge in their life or in their work. Perhaps the result is better relationships, a sense of strength, feeling less vulnerable, and an increased sense of self-worth. So, Andy, back to you.
All right. Thank you, Janice. Again, by now you know how this works. It's your opportunity to share your ideas. And the question this time is, how can you encourage being purpose-driven within your team of VISTA? So thoughts you might have about building purposeful and mission-focused practices within the team. And again, please make sure you select all panelists and attendees so that everyone else will be able to see your ideas as well. All right, thank you. Megan says, remind VISTAs of their past accomplishments and the impact that they've had. Yeah, absolutely. It can be easy to forget when you've accomplished something or when the work you've done has been impactful. It's easy to forget because we're always focused on what is the next thing that we've got to get done and where we're headed. So as a leader, it can be really helpful for you to remind them of what they've done. Let's see, Charlotte says, we have our VISTAs write a letter to self at the beginning of service to remind them why they decided to join VISTA and commit to a year of service. That is a great suggestion. Megan loves it too. And by the way, I'm going to capture all of these great ideas and I'll put them together in a document and post them on the campus. And I'll follow up with an email when that is available there so that you'll have them to take with you. And, you know, in that, the focus on the, you know, getting your members to talk about why they joined, you can send that letter to them later, you know, when they get tougher, or remind them to open it at a point. But if you get to see it, you can also remind them, just in conversation with them, you know, when times get tough or when things are challenging, you can tap back into that why for your members. All right, we've got a bunch more. John says, having VISTAs make a list of goals they want to contribute throughout their service year and then continue to update that list. Jack shared creating work plans and goals throughout their year, so this is similar, and referencing progress made in each one-on-one check-in. Yeah, so a lot of times the work plan can seem like a really daunting thing, but if you can use that as a celebration to say, look at all you've done, you know, every week or every couple of weeks when you're checking in with them, that is a great motivator. Let's see, Cheryl shares 2 things that we've done this summer. One is focus on what we can do, keep going back to our mission, and tie it into what is possible to fulfilling our mission and vision. It has been instrumental in keeping us positive and upbeat. Thank you, Cheryl, for sharing that. And let's see, Olympia says, we celebrate completed tasks and steps in project goals as you all share updates at meetings. So great, so sounds like there's some commonality among a few of those ideas there. Let's see, Cheryl also wrote, she loves the idea of creating a purpose board. So that is a great suggestion that Janice shared. One other idea that you might consider is, we've talked about doing this individually with your vistas, but you might also ask the team to come up with a shared vision that incorporates all of their individual values and their personal whys. And then, that could be in the form of a purpose board or some other kind of visual representation. And then you can refer back to that shared vision from time to time. Let's see, Kayla says, assist vistas in identifying their skill set and how their goals can align with their skills. And Joelle shared, learning for your Vista members, learning their communication and motivation styles in order for them to feel individually encouraged. Right, so tailoring the feedback and the encouragement that you give to your members based on their individual communication style and what it is that motivates them. All right, these are terrific. Thank you all for sharing. And Janice, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much. Magnificent practices. Thank you, Vista leaders. My goodness, they are wonderful. I love the idea of writing a letter to self. I mean, they were all wonderful. Thank you. And I'll just add that if you do the purpose board or whatever it is you decide to do to keep purpose and the big picture of why in front of your vistas, it prevents burnout because you all are doing such important work, and so keeping that purpose in front of you will help prevent burnout. So thank you for all those magnificent suggestions. Okay, fourth strategy, cultivating relationships. Positive social relationships are key to resilience. And cultivating them, nurturing them is this fourth strategy. So number one, when you cultivate relationships, you connect with others you trust and care about. You draw strength from them and seek their guidance. Secondly, this strategy means growing and learning from a network of people who have different perspectives and skills. This taps into that continuous learning action that we want to be ongoing. And when you build relationships with people that have different perspectives, it really enhances your growth as a resilient leader. Thirdly, we saw earlier that providing empathy and support to those around us can be positive to ourselves as well. Having a positive social relationship is clearly a winning strategy, tied to greater psychological and physical well-being. Spending time and energy improving existing relationships and being open to building new relationships is an excellent resilience strategy. So let's look at some practices, cultivate relationship practices. First, keep in regular contact with people in your personal and professional networks. If you've fallen out of touch, reconnect. Figure out the best way to stay in touch with people. Now with social media and texting and emailing and all that, it really is easy to stay in touch. So, really find out what's the best method and stay in touch with your people. Second, coach and mentor people who are having a difficult time. And it's interesting, but what I've heard from all your practices as Vista leaders, those marvelous practices, there's coaching in there that you're doing with your Vistas, so it's really very wonderful. Coach and mentor people who are having a difficult time. Figure out what they need and other resources that you can provide. Helping others builds our own emotional resilience. And third, find ways to add value to your relationships. There is a wise saying from the African American tradition, Each one, teach one. Connect, listen deeply to share ideas and resources, be supportive, be present for people. And finally, identify and put into practice things that build trust and respect in your work environment. For example, follow through on promises made, even little ones. If you have an issue with someone, address it with them directly in a respectful manner. Andy, I'll turn it back to you.
All right, and here again is your opportunity to weigh in. And this time the question is, what are some ways you build trust and connection within your team of Vistas? How do you encourage your Vistas to appreciate the power of each other, right? The power of their peer network? And what are some of the ways that you can help them see the benefit of social connections to help meet the challenges that they face? And I'll remind you, make sure you change the to line on the chat so that it goes to panelists and attendees. All right, we've got some responses coming in. So Tiffany says she uses Brene Brown's concept of braving. Olympia says to share your own story as a way to get that started, building that trust and connection. Jack says building rapport in the beginning and then throughout their service term. Sharing parts of yourself as a foundation of the relationship. Yeah, so there's modeling there, right? If you make the first step, you're initiating that as sort of modeling it, but you're also creating a foundation of trust and openness to begin with. Megan says, maintain confidentiality and listen actively. Yeah, so important in the trust realm. The confidentiality is really important there. Tyler shared, actively listening from the beginning of the relationship and holding that practice each time you interact. Great suggestion. Joelle says, that's great, Megan. Active listening is so important. Indeed it is. Dacia says she always lets them know that we're in this together, right? So that's the connection building and the team, and letting them know that they can count on you. So part of the trust building there. All right, and Cheryl shared that at team meetings, we've had members share a celebration of one of their colleagues that they witnessed while working with them through the week. So it's I've seen this in some areas. It's like I caught you doing something good, or having team members to celebrate one another when they've had successes or they've really seen them doing well. And John shared following up and following through on resolving issues, even small ones, that the individual or the team expresses. Again, so that it really does go back, the whole trust building issue goes back to being reliable, right? That if you say you're going to do something, they can count on you to do it. These are all great ideas. Janice, I guess we'll go back to you, and if we get any more, we'll see them come in the chat.
Absolutely. Thank you. Again, marvelous. These are incredible. And a lot of what I heard were very much coaching competencies. So not only are you leaders, but you're integrating coaching competencies into that leadership, which is just really outstanding. And I applaud you for that, particularly like some of the things you said: confidentiality, active listening, following up, following through, building that trust. All wonderful examples of coaching competencies that really strengthen you as leaders. So outstanding. Thank you. Okay, so there are 4 strategies. We showed you practices around those 4 strategies, and now this is questions to bring out resilience. And I offer this as a tool for you to use with your VISTA team. It's a tool for reflection and offers a structure to create a learning culture. You can use these questions for yourself, perhaps, and with your team at a meeting as a reflection on a project or initiative. But this reflection practice reinforces a positive workplace culture through dialogue and discovery of lessons learned and of continuous growth and improvement. So the first question, what's the opportunity this situation could lead to? Now, this question really facilitates responses that reframe us to a positive mindset. What can we do about this? How do we face this situation? How do we use it to our advantage and learn? What could be the gift of learning here is another way to propose that question. Second question. The next one has respondents, the next one, you reflect on strengths and capabilities and deepens self-awareness. So what are the skills, habits, knowledge you have? And another way to put that is, what competencies can I use to manage this particular challenge? So again, using these 3 questions as a tool. And thirdly and finally, focus on observing patterns and actions in yourself and your team. Where have you seen the strongest momentum up to this point? You can use insights from this question for change. It helps identify where we find energy and what actions improve our capacity for resilience. So, finally, I'm going to share with you some resources, and there is a handout with many resources on them, and I'll continue to add to that and send them to Andy because I'm doing a lot of research on this, and I certainly would want you to have anything that I come up with for your benefit. But 3 that really come to the top of my list if I were going to go study resilience immediately. 3 Secrets of Resilience is a TED Talk by Dr. Lucy Hone. Dr. Hone studied resilience as a researcher for her career, and then she had this tragedy of losing her 12-year-old daughter in an accident, and she talks about how she actually went back through her grief and used the strategies and practices she discovered through her work as a researcher. Secondly, and we mentioned Dr. Brown before, Dare to Lead, outstanding book about leadership, about the willingness to step up and put yourself out there, lean into courage. The world is desperate for braver leaders, especially now, and you are all incredibly brave. It's time for all of us to step up. And the third, Work-Life Balance, is a podcast by Adam Grant, and he is a professor at Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania. And his class has waiting lists constantly because he is so popular. And his work focuses on the keys to better work, deeper resilience, and improved performance. You'll never see your service in the same way again. It's quite profound. Okay, so Andy, back to you.
All right, thank you, Janice, for all those resources. And as you saw, the handout, there's a link to that in the chat if you want to have that full list of resources there. So now it's time for us to get to your questions, but before we do, I want to invite you to complete a short evaluation that we have for the webinar. I promise you, I read every single comment that you put in there, and if you have ideas for future topics, that is especially helpful. So I'd love to hear those from you. The survey should already be open in a browser window behind your Zoom, but if not, there's a link in the chat as well. All right, so we do have time for your questions. We'll use the chat, so if you've got questions, feel free to put them in there. And if you haven't been in the chat with us, you can move your mouse to the bottom of the screen and you'll see the little chat icon pop up there as well. So I'll pause and see if we have any questions come in. All right, not really a question, but we did get a comment from Cheryl saying, great webinar, looking forward to reviewing it again. There's so much information to absorb. So thank you for that. Glad to hear that we've been able to offer something productive and useful. And what we can do if it seems that there really aren't questions, we can go ahead and move forward. Janice and I will stay on, so if anyone does have questions, you can kind of stay after class, and we'll be happy to answer those. All right, so we've got a couple right here. So John says, if you have a Vista who's feeling overwhelmed and is struggling bouncing back, how would you be compassionate while still trying to encourage resiliency? So Janice, do you have thoughts on that question?
Well, and that is a great question, John. Thank you. If someone is feeling overwhelmed, you know, a good thing would be to put your coaching hat on and talk one-on-one. Don't so much worry about resilience at that point. At this point, compassion. Listen, ask questions. Be curious. What's going on? What could I do to support you? You know, what ways can we move forward together? You're not in this alone. So again, the thing would be putting your coaching hat on and really listening to what's going on for that person. Because once you get to the bottom of that, then they'll be able to move and bounce back once they feel heard and validated and acknowledged for what they're going through. Okay, John? Let's see.
All right, we've got another question. If a Vista is having a problem at site, would it be a good idea to visit them at their site? I think that much more could be done if we were in person.
Well, I mean, yes, I think so. There is nothing more powerful than a one-on-one, especially when someone's struggling. So, you know, again, putting, you know, being leader as coach and going to that site and sitting with that person and, again, asking questions, being curious, what's going on. That shows such care for that person, care for the whole, you know, it just, that kind of respect that you would take the time to go to the site to sit with that Vista member is invaluable and will go a long way to helping them move forward.
All right, great. A couple more questions. If you have a Vista who is struggling to navigate teleworking hours, working from home, what would be some of the best ways to encourage them to maintain a healthy work-life balance while making sure that they continue to fulfill their work requirements?
Well, you know, and that's something with this, you know, new world we live in where everything is so virtual, it is challenging. Well, I would help, I would support that Vista in sort of being organized, because I think one of the things that happens with the whole, you know, virtual life and trying to you know, have some work-life balance is that we need to really organize and schedule. We need to schedule our work hours and then, you know, turn it off, you know, really have an edge or a boundary there and have some downtime, some recovery time, like we mentioned. So I would support that Vista in creating a schedule, you know, even maybe for the week, and have the schedule be visible so that they can see their week. maybe post it on a wall. That's a helpful tool. For me, I'm very visual, so that helps me, and it might help your vistas see their schedule and see where they're going to have, how they can organize their work life and their home life. Does that make sense? I didn't see who asked that question. Oh, there's a lot of questions. Oh, excellent.
There
Lovely.
are indeed.
Yes.
Yeah, so we can certainly stay on. We have time. We can answer those questions.
Absolutely.
Before we do, because I know some of you may have to leave, I just want to quickly announce next month's webinar for Vista leaders. It's assessing professional development needs in your vistas. It'll be on Thursday, August 13th. You'll be getting an email about it. It'll be posted on the Vista campus, but that's a little plug there. So, all right. Let's go back to our questions. So Tyler asked, how could you restart a resilient team dynamic remotely? My Vista project coordinator left our organization early into my service term a few months ago, and I've had issues getting Vistas to connect with me now that only a Vista leader and an interim staff member are available to them,
Boy, that is a challenge right now creating resilient teams now in this virtual world. One thing I would suggest is to create a sort of an early morning huddle, and it could be like 15 minutes. So every day there's a check-in with your team. And it might be, what is the priority on your plate today? How can I support you? What can you contribute to our team? So again, that really, this virtual world, building resilience around this requires a lot of communication. So I would start with a daily check-in, really short, succinct, precise, but a daily check-in. And then if someone is having an issue and does want to talk on that particular time, you can say, this is just our morning huddle. Why don't you call me at another time and we'll talk deeper about the topic. But really important, because that will show the consistency, the care, the connection, which is very, very important at this time. I hope that helps. Alcina?
Yeah, and Tyler says thank you.
Yes.
So we have one more question that I can see from Olympia. Any specific suggestions for helping Vistas to be resilient in response to the communal trauma of the pandemic? Things like social distancing, isolation, the whole reopening and then lockdown limbo, safe service, etc. Any thoughts there, Janice?
Well, Olympia, yes, go back to thinking about self-care and for yourself, and to model that for your Vistas. Encourage them to take time to do some of the practices we mentioned in the Resilience Leadership webinar, but also think of other ways. What are ways you can, make sure you do the recovery, every 90 to 120 minutes. Have them really think about that and incorporate into the daily work, and help them do that. Check in with them. How did it go with the practice? Putting some coaching competencies into your leadership. But it's all about self-care, which is critical at this time for all of us. And you as a Vista leader have to role model that. So look at practices, encourage them to identify a practice they want to start, and then hold them gently and lovingly accountable to that. How did it go? Were you able to stay with that practice? Remember, practice 21 days and you have a new habit. Okay, Olympia, does that answer some of your question there? Let's see. Okay.
It looks like it does.
Okay. Thank you. That was a great question. They're all great questions. Thank you.
Yeah, these have been great.
Yes.
All right. So that wraps up this webinar. I really want to thank our presenter, Janice Glenn, as well as our production team. And I want to thank all of you for participating and sharing the effective practices. We hope that our time together, you're able to take some strategies for building resilience in yourself as well as within your team. And I'd like to leave you with this quote from Rosabeth Moss Kanter, who's a professor at the Harvard Business School. "Surprises are the new normal. Resilience is the new skill." Thank you for watching.